a confession whispered too late, and a truth that refuses to stay buried. Welcome to Mystery Parlour. I am your host, Axon. Share in the intrigue. Tell me where you're listening from. Your messages always brighten this journey. Now, into the mystery. It was widely agreed in Flaxborough that the annual Founders' Day Assembly of the Grammar School possessed all the ceremony and excitement of a tepid blancmange. There were reliable fixtures, the headmaster's address, which never failed to include the phrase, "matters of no small importance," the presentation of academic prizes to boys who blushed like boiled beetroot, and the distribution of tepid tea afterwards, brewed in the same urn that had allegedly survived an air raid. On this particular overcast Thursday, however, the proceedings promised an unusual thrill, or at least the faintest hint of one. Mr. Lionel Bracegirdle, senior master of Latin and the terror of boys whose declensions remained stubbornly undeclined, had announced at short notice that he would be delivering a personal statement of grave concern before the main program began. Naturally, this caused far more interest than the program itself. Teachers clustered in small, worried constellations along the staff room's dun-colored walls. Parents speculated in muted tones as though discussing a parishioner who had begun attending chapel too eagerly, and pupils, sensing the atmospheric pressure of adult unease, vibrated with malicious anticipation. Mr. Bracegirdle himself stood on the stage's narrow dais, his gown hanging from his rigid frame like funeral drapery. His expression was one of somber duty, punctuated by the occasional twitch around the mouth that hinted at suppressed turmoil or indigestion. The hall's musty hush deepened. Headmaster Dr. Primrose Bentley, a man who had perfected the expression of gracious bewilderment, stepped forward and tapped the microphone. It responded with a sharp crack that made several governors flinch. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys," he began, "Mr. Bracegirdle desires, with my full consent, to address you briefly before the commencement of our Founders' Day ceremony. I trust that you will listen with the utmost courtesy and, interpret his remarks in the spirit in which they are intended." This curious preface generated an immediate murmur. Even the parents in the back row, who traditionally treated the event as an opportunity for discreet dozing, leaned forward. Bracegirdle advanced, clutching a single sheet of paper. He cleared his throat as if preparing to cross-examine himself. "I have," he said, "an admission." The silence sharpened. "For several months," he continued, "I have been aware of an impropriety, a matter which, if not addressed, would compromise the moral foundation of this institution." This caused a ripple through the audience. One of the governors emitted a strangled bark, possibly of protest, possibly indigestion. Bracegirdle raised the paper, though he did not look at it. "I confess that an object of great significance, entrusted to the school's keeping for over a century, has been misappropriated, stolen, removed under circumstances I shall presently explain." A shiver of excitement ran through the student body. Several boys exchanged the sort of gleefully horrified looks ordinarily reserved for glimpsing a master's bicycle collapse in the rain. "What object?" called a parent. Bracegirdle ignored the interruption. "I alone am responsible for discovering the truth, the concealment, the deception, the moral rot." At this unexpected flourish, Headmaster Bentley shifted uneasily. The distinction between confession and sermon was beginning to blur. Bracegirdle took a breath, steadying himself. "The Founders' Register book," he declared. "It has been taken." A stunned pause followed, filled only by the faint hum of the lights and an apprehensive cough from the school secretary. The Founders' Register book, a vellum-bound volume containing the names of every significant donor and benefactor since the school's establishment, was, in the estimation of most residents, not unlike an old family Bible, revered, rarely opened, and valuable only in the sense that one would feel guilty for misplacing it. But its disappearance, and Bracegirdle's announcement of it, stirred disquiet. For in Flaxborough, the theft of anything with a brass plaque attached to it constituted a matter of near ecclesiastical gravity. Bracegirdle continued, voice tightening. I must further state that this theft is connected with actions of a most reprehensible nature, actions that I am prepared to expose today. A gasp, not entirely sincere, travelled through the hall. Then, abruptly, Bracegirdle's rigid posture slackened. His face drained of colour. He clutched the edge of the lectern. Those nearest saw his lips move, as though forming a final word. But whatever he intended to say dissolved into silence. He dropped the sheet of paper, which fluttered down like an exhausted bird and collapsed heavily to the stage floor. There were screams, respectable ones, of course, befitting the setting. Parents surged forward with the eagerness of those who wish to help but not necessarily touch anything. Bentley knelt beside his stricken master, fluttering ineffectually. Lionel? Oh dear, someone fetch the nurse. Or, well, someone. The nurse, appearing with the disconcerting promptness of one who had been listening from just outside the door, elbowed her way through the crowd. The verdict was swift. A fainting spell, possibly exhaustion, certainly stress. And yet, something about Bracegirdle's pallor made her brow crease. Bracegirdle was carried, a process involving more ceremony than grace, into the infirmary. His cryptic statement remained suspended in the air like a half-finished equation. Inside the hall, conversation erupted with the energy of a released boiler. What did he mean by actions of reprehensible nature? Probably one of the boys copied his Latin homework. No, the register. That old thing. Why announce it in front of everyone? Perhaps he wanted attention. He never liked the new timetable. Do you think he was about to accuse someone? I do hope so. At the back of the hall, where he had been standing unobtrusively in accordance with a polite instinct not to overshadow event stewards, was Inspector Walter Purbright. He had not expected to attend Founders' Day. Indeed, the invitation had arrived only because Sergeant Malley's niece was receiving a prize and Malley had contrived to be on duty elsewhere. Inspectors, Purbright noted, were ideal replacements when ceremonially required to sit still and clap at intervals. Now, as excited chatter swirled around him, Purbright's mild, pleasant gaze settled on the crumpled sheet of paper lying on the stage. Someone stepped on it in passing. No one picked it up. That, he reflected, was already rather interesting. He made his way quietly toward the dais. Dr. Bentley intercepted him, flustered. Inspector, I assure you this is a most unexpected development. Mr. Bracegirdle is, prone to earnestness. One must treat his statements with caution. Of course, Purbright replied gently. I wonder, though, might I take a quick look at the paper he dropped? Bentley coloured. Oh, yes, the statement. Well, I suppose. Strictly speaking, though perhaps it would be sensible to wait until Mr. Bracegirdle is more lucid. Purbright smiled calmly. Quite. Still, if no one objects, it may prevent worry. Bentley wavered, torn between propriety and the inspector's calm persistence. At last, he conceded with a sigh. Purbright stooped and retrieved the paper. It was blank, save for a single line in tense, cramped handwriting. I know who took it. No name. No accusation. Just the weight of a secret that had compelled a man to make a public confession and nearly utter something more, before collapsing. Purbright folded the page neatly and slipped it into his pocket. Outside, faintly, came the sound of the school bell ringing, as if attempting to call the town back to normality. Purbright suspected it would not succeed. Not today. Not for a while. The news of Mr. Bracegirdle's collapse travelled through Flaxborough with the nimble efficiency of a rumour in search of a scandal. By mid-afternoon, every shopkeeper along High Street had offered at least 2 theories and dismissed 3 others. By early evening, the ladies of the Women's Guild, meeting ostensibly to discuss floral arrangements for their summer fete, had abandoned chrysanthemums entirely in favor of character assessments of the Latin master. And by nightfall, every pub in town was able to present its own confident explanation, complete with illustrative gestures and a certainty unsupported by the slightest evidence. Inspector Purbright, meanwhile, had spent the rest of the morning in the cramped infirmary office, where Nurse Drabble presided with the briskness of one who regarded anyone unconscious as personally inconvenient. Bracegirdle still lay on the camp bed behind her, breathing shallowly, colorless but stable. The nurse insisted it was exhaustion, possibly shock, but she did not hide her curiosity behind her spectacles. Purbright had thanked her, assured her that someone would remain nearby in case Bracegirdle woke, and then quietly made his way across the school grounds in the direction of the headmaster's study. The day remained overcast, as though the clouds were reluctant to part, while a moral irregularity, however minor, remained unresolved below. Dr. Bentley was seated at his polished oak desk, surrounded by piles of timetables and circulars that appeared to stress him merely by existing. He sprang to his feet the moment Purbright entered. "My dear Inspector, do come in, though I must warn you, I've had very little time to steady my thoughts. Quite the ordeal this morning. Quite the ordeal." Purbright eased himself into the chair opposite. "I imagine it was unsettling. I hope Mr. Bracegirdle is not known for such dramatic announcements." "Good heavens, no. Lionel is generally a man of, well, I hesitate to use the word staid, but it fits him rather neatly. One never expects outbursts from him. His disapproval usually arrives in carefully graded tones." "And the Founder's Register book?" Purbright asked mildly. "Is its disappearance as recent as he implied?" Bentley pressed his fingertips together, considering. "That is the curious part. I cannot say when it vanished. The book is kept in the locked case in the archives room. We retrieve it for Founder's Day only, to place it on display. When Mrs. Minturn went to fetch it last week, she thought nothing of finding the cabinet empty, assumed it was being rebound or that I had signed it out to show a governor." He managed a thin smile. "It is not an object often disturbed." "Who holds the key?" "Oh, several of us, I'm afraid. Myself, the deputy head, Mrs. Minturn, and the bursar. We have always treated it as a matter of shared trust rather than strict protocol." Bentley sighed. "In hindsight, perhaps too shared." Purbright let that sit, allowing the silence to grow just long enough for Bentley to shift uneasily. "And Mr. Bracegirdle," Purbright said at last, "would he ordinarily be concerned about its disappearance?" "Lionel values tradition," Bentley replied diplomatically. "He believes the school's moral character is inscribed not only in the minds of the pupils, but also in leather-bound relics. Still, I did not expect him to view the absence of the register as a matter for confession." Purbright nodded thoughtfully. "May I see the archive room?" Bentley led him across a courtyard that smelled faintly of chalk and boiled cabbage, then down a stone corridor lined with framed photographs of past prize winners. They stopped before a narrow door marked Archive, authorized access only. Inside, the room was dim, the only illumination a single small window and a green-shaded lamp perched on the bursar's cluttered desk. The glass-fronted cabinet stood against the far wall. Its brass lock was intact, though the interior looked strangely bare. A rectangular impression in the dust marked where the register had once lain. Purbright examined the lock, then the hinges, then the floor round the cabinet. "No signs of force," he murmured. "None at all," Bentley confirmed. "Whoever removed the register did so with a key." Purbright's gaze drifted toward the bursar's desk. A drawer hung slightly open as though closed in haste. Bentley caught the look and colored faintly. "Oh, that is Mr. Fenning's work. He disposes of his paperwork with a certain Abandon. Purbright offered a polite smile, though his eyes lingered on the drawer for another thoughtful moment. After leaving the archive, he walked slowly back toward the front of the school. Children were beginning to spill into the corridors for afternoon classes, their voices echoing off the tiled walls. A few shot glances at him, curiosity simmering beneath the compulsory air of respect. Purbright ignored none of them, yet seemed not to stare at anyone in particular, a talent that made youngsters instinctively aware of every past misdeed they had committed. At the main entrance, he found Sergeant Malley waiting anxiously, cap in hand. "Sir," Malley said, "I've been hearing all sorts in town. Mrs. Kettle from the bakery swears Bracegirdle was about to announce he'd unearthed a ring of forgers using the school basement." Purbright gave him a patient look. "Mrs. Kettle also believes her neighbor communicates with pigeons. Let us wait for evidence." Malley nodded sheepishly. "Shall I look in on Bracegirdle again?" "Please do, and ask Nurse Drabble to notify us at once if he regains consciousness." Purbright looked back at the school building, its brick façade solid and respectable. "There is something about the timing of this morning's announcement that troubles me, Malley." Malley brightened, eager for a mystery. "What part of it, sir?" Purbright's smile was faint. Timing is often the first clue that someone intended their message to be heard by a particular audience. He left Malley to ponder this, walking slowly down the gravel path toward the gate. Behind him, the school bell rang again, this time with a wavering clang, as though even its mechanism found the day faintly unsettling. Purbright did not yet know who had taken the register, or why, but Bracegirdle's collapse, that abrupt faltering of nerve or body, had frozen his confession mid-breath, and Purbright could not shake the feeling that someone else, somewhere in the hall, had been silently willing him not to finish his sentence. The inspector paused at the gate, frowning slightly at the sky. The clouds still promised nothing but dullness. He suspected the days ahead would deliver something rather different. As Purbright walked back toward the station, the weight of the grey sky overhead was matched only by the slow but steady accretion of details in his mind. None decisive, but each with a faint, irritating edge of significance. He paused once on the pavement, as though to admire a window display of gardening tools, but his gaze was inward, replaying the moment Bracegirdle had crumpled at the lectern. The man's collapse had held none of the theatrical flourish of a fainting spell. Rather, it had been abrupt, almost reluctant, as if Bracegirdle had tried to force out one last sentence and been forcibly prevented. Purbright resumed walking. He reached the police station, where the familiar smell of paper, dust, and Sergeant Malley's aggressively floral tea greeted him. Malley appeared from behind the partition with the hopeful expression of a man expecting something dramatic. "Anything new from the school, sir?" he asked. "Not yet," Purbright replied, removing his coat. "But Nurse Drabble should notify us the moment Bracegirdle regains consciousness." Malley nodded. "Glad someone understands the urgency. Half the town seems convinced he was poisoned." Purbright gave him a look sharp enough to deflate that balloon. "There is no evidence of anything of the sort. Rumor tends to fill the quiet moments before facts arrive." "Still," Malley said carefully, "it would explain why he went down like that." "It would explain too much and too conveniently," Purbright countered. "More often, events such as these are the result of private strain, and private strain is rarely unconnected to circumstances." Malley blinked, decided these words held more meaning than he could yet interpret, and retreated to fetch tea. Purbright took a seat at his desk, pulling from his pocket the sheet Bracegirdle had dropped. He read again the cramped scrawl. "I know who took it," then folded the page with the same neat precision as before. The identity of the intended accusation seemed less important than why Bracegirdle had chosen such a public setting, such a theatrical moment. It was wholly unlike him, according to Bentley. Teachers of Bracegirdle's outlook preferred decorum to drama. Purbright's thoughts were interrupted by a brisk rap on the door. Mrs. Kettle from the bakery entered without waiting for a response. wearing the determined expression of a woman who had carried her theory as far as the police station and now intended to unload it. "Inspector," she began, "I know you'll want to hear this. I've just spoken to young Martin Polling, you know, the boy who wins all those Latin prizes. And he says Mr. Bracegirdle was in quite a state last night at choir practice." Purbright suppressed the sigh that threatened to escape. "In what way, Mrs. Kettle?" "He was distracted. Very distracted. Couldn't find his place in the music, and that man can follow a score better than most can follow a recipe. Young Martin said he kept muttering under his breath. Something about, 'It can't be allowed to continue.' Very ominous. And did Martin indicate whether this muttering concerned the register?" "Well, no," Mrs. Kettle admitted reluctantly. But Martin thought it sounded rather like a man preparing for something dreadful. Purbright thanked her with genuine politeness. Mrs. Kettle, satisfied that her civic duty had been discharged, swept out again. Mally reappeared seconds later with 2 mugs of tea and a perplexed expression. "Sir, I don't know how she always gets here ahead of me." "Gravity," Purbright replied. "Some personalities exert a natural pull." He sipped his tea. "Mally, please find out who attended the choir practice last night." Discreetly. Mally brightened. "Yes, sir." "And," Purbright added as Mally turned to leave, "if any of them mention Bracegirdle behaving oddly, try to determine whether his state seemed caused by fear or indignation. The two can resemble each other, but seldom sound alike." Mally blinked at him again, then marched off with determination. The afternoon wore on, punctuated by small interruptions. A telephone call from a council member wanting reassurance that the school wasn't collapsing into scandal. A constable delivering a stack of petty complaints requiring attention, and an elderly gentleman seeking advice about an aggressive swan. Purbright dealt with each, though his mind remained fixed firmly upon Bracegirdle's unfinished confession. At 3:30, the telephone rang with a shrill urgency. Purbright answered it at once. "Inspector." "Nurse Drabble." "Mr. Bracegirdle has regained consciousness." Purbright rose immediately. "Is he able to speak?" "Yes, though he is weak. He insists on talking to you." "I'll be there shortly." He arrived at the school within minutes, Mally close behind. Nurse Drabble ushered them into the infirmary, where Bracegirdle lay propped among pillows, his face pale, his expression one of weary resolve. Purbright approached quietly. "Mr. Bracegirdle, I'm pleased to see you awake." Bracegirdle's gaze shifted toward him. For a moment, something like fear flickered across his features. Then he collected himself. "Inspector, I must apologize for the scene this morning. It was not my intention. Not this way." "You were making a statement," Purbright said softly. "Something concerning the register." Bracegirdle swallowed, his hand tightening around the blanket. "Yes, the register. It is more important than most people realize." "In what way?" Purbright asked. Bracegirdle's breathing quickened, as though the weight of the answer strained against his ribs. "There is an entry in it. An addition made recently, a false one, a lie placed among the names. Someone hoped it would go unnoticed." "And you discovered it?" Bracegirdle nodded weakly. "Whose name was added?" Purbright asked. Bracegirdle's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Instead, his eyes widened suddenly, as if startled by something remembered rather than seen. His hand reached toward Purbright, trembling. I should not have tried to speak of it publicly," he whispered. "It was foolish, very foolish." Purbright leaned slightly closer. "Who added the name?" Bracegirdle opened his mouth once more, struggling for breath. Then, with a faint, strangled whisper, he said only, "Be careful, Inspector." His head sank back onto the pillow. Nurse Drabble hurried forward, alarmed. Bracegirdle had lost consciousness again. Purbright straightened slowly. Mally stared at him, wide-eyed. "What do you think he meant, sir?" Purbright did not answer at once. His gaze lingered on Bracegirdle's still form. The fleeting warning was troubling not for what it contained, but for everything it did not. At last, Purbright spoke in a quiet, reflective tone. "I think," he said, "someone in this town is rather more anxious about their name than they wish to appear." Purbright remained by Bracegirdle's bedside a moment longer, not because there was anything more to be gained. The man had slipped again into that troubling, shallow sleep, but because the inspector sensed that the room itself still contained the faint echo of the warning. Not a dramatic one, not even a direct one, but the sort that clung to a man who had realized, a fraction too late, that he had trespassed into someone else's closely guarded territory. He turned to Nurse Drubble. "Please keep a close eye on him, and notify me the moment he wakes again." She nodded briskly, though her eyes were softer than before. "He's frightened of something, Inspector. You can see it even when he sleeps." Purbright acknowledged this with a small incline of the head, then stepped outside with Mally trailing after him. The corridor buzzed faintly with the subdued energy of a school trying to pretend nothing unusual had occurred. A group of boys hurried past, glancing in the inspector's direction with expressions of poorly disguised delight. Purbright suspected that by evening they would each be claiming to have seen Bracegirdle collapse from a variety of improbable poisons. As they walked toward the exit, Mally cleared his throat. "Sir, if Bracegirdle knows who added that false name, do you think he was afraid to say it?" Purbright considered that. "If he feared the consequences, yes. But I'm more interested in why he attempted to reveal it in such a dramatic fashion. Someone like Bracegirdle does not seek a stage unless he believes silence has become more dangerous than speech." Mally frowned. "Meaning someone might have warned him off already." "That," Purbright said gently, "is one possible conclusion." Outside, the air had grown colder, and a pale breeze stirred the gravel. The inspector paused at the gate, gazing toward the high street as though expecting the truth to stroll out from behind a hedgerow. But nothing presented itself, and so he and Mally began the walk back toward town. It was only a few minutes before the next thread presented itself. They had nearly reached the corner by the church when a flustered figure emerged from the path leading to the vestry. Mrs. Minturn, the school secretary, clutched a stack of files to her chest as though the papers might escape and reveal secrets best left undisturbed. She spotted Purbright, slowed, then, after a moment of indecision, approached him. "Inspector, I didn't want to disturb you at the school, but, well, there's something I feel I ought to mention." Purbright offered her his mildest, least intrusive smile. "Of course. What is it?" Mrs. Minturn darted a look around, as though suspicious that a shrub might be listening. "It's about the register. I should have told Dr. Bentley last week, but I didn't want to cause alarm. You see, the last person I recall seeing near the archive room late in the day, before I discovered the book missing, was Mr. Fenning, the bursar." Purbright raised an eyebrow. "Did he say why he was there?" "That's just it," she whispered. "He said he was looking for a mislaid invoice, but the bursar's documents are kept in the finance office, and he seemed startled when I appeared." Mally's ears pricked up like a hopeful terrier. "Startled how, ma'am?" "Well," she said, pressing the folders closer, as if I'd walked in on him doing something he very much did not want witnessed, and he left rather abruptly, almost trotted. "That is helpful, Mrs. Minturn," Purbright said warmly. "Thank you." She exhaled with relief, nodded, and hurried off toward the church, muttering something about hymn sheets. Mally turned to the inspector the moment she was out of earshot. "Fenning, sir?" "Possibly," Purbright replied. "But we should avoid leaping from suspicion to certainty. People often behave oddly near rooms where something is missing. It is a natural urge to appear uninvolved even when perfectly innocent." "Still," Mally murmured, "it's something." "It is," Purbright agreed, "and something is usually better than nothing, provided one doesn't treat it as everything." They walked on, By the time they reached the station, the light had begun to dim, the day relaxing into the gentle gloom that suited Flaxborough so well. Purbright took off his coat and sat down, allowing his thoughts to assemble into their familiar patterns. "Sir," Mally began cautiously, "do you think we should have a word with Fenning now?" "Not yet," Purbright replied. "When a man is inclined to conceal something, speaking to him too soon merely encourages him to practice concealment more thoroughly. Better to observe first." Mally nodded, though with visible reluctance. Patience was not his strongest virtue. They were just settling into the quiet rhythm of paperwork when the telephone rang. Purbright answered it, listening in the still, attentive way that always made Mally stand straighter. After a moment, Purbright said, "Yes, I'll come at once," and put the receiver down. "Another development, sir?" Mally asked. "Dr. Bentley," Purbright replied. "He wishes us to see something he has only just noticed." They returned to the school, where Bentley met them at the entrance, his expression a portrait of subdued panic. "Inspector, Sergeant, this way quickly, if you please." He led them to his study, closed the door, and went straight to a small locked drawer in his desk. From it, he withdrew a bundle of folded papers tied with string. "These," Bentley said, almost choking on the words, "were in my post this afternoon. They are photocopies of pages from the register, at least parts of pages." Purbright took the bundle, untied the string, and laid the papers out on the desk. Each was a carefully copied section of the register. Dates, names of benefactors, bequests. But one page, unmistakably recent, bore a name squeezed between two entries dated nearly 10 years apart. The ink in the copy was darker than the rest, clearly added long after the original manuscript. Mally leaned in. "That's the false name, sir?" "Possibly," Purbright murmured. Dr. Bentley swallowed. "But that's not the worst part. Look at the final sheet." Purbright lifted it, and there, in bold strokes, was a message written across the photocopy. "Stop digging or you will regret it." The room went very quiet. Mally looked from the paper to Purbright, horrified. "Sir, that's a threat." "Yes," Purbright said calmly. "A rather unrefined one. But threats are useful, Sergeant." "Useful," Mally repeated. Purbright folded the sheet with perfect care, because whoever feels compelled to make one has already begun to lose their balance. Purbright held the threatening sheet between his fingertips for a long, reflective moment, as though weighing not merely the paper but the temperament behind its creation. Dr. Bentley hovered beside him, his agitation barely contained, while Mally shifted his weight anxiously from foot to foot. "It arrived in my personal post," Bentley murmured. "Not the school's, addressed to my home. I opened it only an hour ago. I feared it might be connected to this morning, and so—" His voice faltered. Purbright placed the sheets gently on the desk. "You were right to call us. The timing is interesting." "Interesting," Bentley repeated, incredulous. "It feels rather more than interesting, Inspector. It feels alarming." "Most things are alarming, Headmaster, until one understands them," Purbright replied placidly. "Fear thrives in vagueness." He indicated the papers. "This was prepared before Bracegirdle's collapse, I suspect, but delivered after. That suggests a certain nervousness." "Nervousness because Bracegirdle attempted to speak publicly?" Bentley asked. "Quite possibly." Mally frowned at the photocopies. "Sir, could the false name belong to someone on the staff? Someone who'd have reason to keep it hidden?" Purbright gave him a small, approving nod. "It is one possibility among several, but let us not narrow the field prematurely. Donations recorded in the register might involve long-standing benefactors, former pupils, individuals whose reputations could be affected if their association were misrepresented." Bentley sank into his chair as though the weight of hypotheticals had knocked him off balance. But why add a false name at all? What purpose could it serve? Benefactors confer influence, Purbright said gently. And the implication of influence, especially in a small town, can be worth more than the influence itself. Bentley looked bewildered, so Purbright softened the explanation. Someone might have wished to appear in the register because it lends a certain distinction, a historical tie to the school, a veneer of respectability, all useful things to display should one seek advancement, approval, or authority. Bentley blinked. A social forgery. Purbright allowed himself the faintest smile. An excellent term. Before Bentley could reply, there was a sharp knock on the study door. It opened to reveal Mrs. Minturn, pink-cheeked and slightly breathless. "Forgive me, Dr. Bentley, but Mr. Fenning is asking for you. He seems quite flustered." Purbright exchanged a brief look with Mally before turning to Mrs. Minturn. "Did he mention why?" "No, Inspector, but he looked awfully put out, pacing the corridor like a man expecting a summons." "Interesting," Purbright murmured. Bentley rose with visible reluctance. "Should I bring him here? Or, if you would," Purbright said kindly. "We won't crowd him. A man in that state tends to reveal more when given room to fidget." Bentley left, and within moments returned with Mr. Fenning, the bursar. Fenning was a thin, fussy individual whose expression always suggested that someone had misappropriated his favorite paperclip. At present, he looked both affronted and nervous, a combination that made his features twitch in small, disjointed spasms. "Inspector," he began, "I must protest these insinuations that seem to be circulating. Mrs. Minturn has implied, she has implied that I was seen lurking around the archive room last week. Lurking? I was searching for an invoice I mislaid. Nothing more." Purbright inclined his head politely. "We haven't suggested anything beyond wishing to understand who had access to the archive. You were there?" Fenning bristled. "Briefly, quite briefly. The room is hardly restricted to myself. Why single me out?" "You single yourself out, Mr. Fenning," Purbright replied gently, "by coming to us before we came to you." It was a soft remark, but it struck the bursar like a pebble thrown into a wasp nest. Fenning sputtered, Any reasonable man would wish to clear his name before gossip paints him guilty." Purbright nodded placidly. "And perhaps any reasonable man would also be concerned about the register being missing." Fenning hesitated. A small pause, but a revealing one. "Naturally," he said stiffly. "The register is of historical importance. It must be recovered." Purbright watched him a moment longer, observing the small mannerisms, the twitching fingers, the shifting stance, the way he avoided glancing at the photocopies on Bentley's desk. "Mr. Fenning," Purbright asked mildly, "do you know of anyone who might benefit from having their name inserted falsely into the register?" Fenning's mouth dropped open, closed, then twitched sideways. "Certainly not. The idea is preposterous. The entries are verified. They must be. Anyone tampering with it would have little to gain." "Then you consider it pointless?" Fenning seized upon this eagerly. "Absolutely pointless. Utterly foolish." Purbright nodded as though satisfied. "Thank you. That will be all for now." Fenning, visibly relieved, yet still simmering, withdrew with a stiff bow to Bentley and a curt nod to Purbright and Mally. When the study door closed, Mally breathed out. "Sir, he's hiding something." "Almost certainly," Purbright agreed. "But whether it is guilt or simply embarrassment remains to be discovered." Bentley rubbed his temples. "Do you believe he stole the register?" "Possibly. But if he did, I doubt the motive is his alone." Purbright gathered up the photocopies once more. Something about the handwriting on the threat seemed forced, too deliberate, as though someone had tried to disguise not their identity, but their personality. "Sergeant," Purbright said, "I want you to check on every photocopier in the school. Staff rooms, offices, departments. See if any were used recently. And speak to the caretaker about after-hours access. Mally brightened. Yes, sir. And Mally? Yes, sir. Do it quietly. If someone is nervous enough to send anonymous threats, we should let them believe their aim is succeeding. Mally nodded solemnly, almost theatrically, before departing. Purbright turned back to Bentley. Headmaster, this false name. You recognized it, didn't you? Bentley stared at him in startled silence. Purbright continued gently, You flinched when you saw it. Recognition leaves a different sort of shadow than surprise. Bentley sank into his chair once more, defeated. Inspector, if it is the name I think it is, then this matter touches a far more delicate corner of the town than I would wish involved. Purbright gave a mild, almost kindly sigh. I suspected as much. And who do you suspect? Bentley whispered. Purbright laid the folded papers back onto the desk. For the moment, I suspect the truth is becoming inconvenient to someone who has benefited from silence for rather a long time. Bentley's dismay hung in the room like mist refusing to lift, and Purbright allowed the silence to lengthen, not threateningly, but in a way that often made anxious men reveal more simply to fill the quiet. When Bentley spoke again, it was in a low, troubled voice. Inspector, if the name truly is who I believe it to be, then the implications are unpleasant. Not necessarily criminal, but unpleasant. Most truths that someone tries to bury tend to be, Purbright said gently. Would you care to confirm your suspicion? Bentley hesitated, chewing his lower lip as though the confession might leave teeth marks. It looks, he said at last, like the name of Arthur Hawcliffe. Purbright maintained his calm expression, though he felt a faint tightening of interest. Hawcliffe, the former councillor? Yes, Bentley muttered. Deceased 10 years, but not before leaving a rather complicated legacy. He had a reputation for, well, generosity paired with opportunism. Purbright nodded slowly. And was he a benefactor of the school? No, never. He applied twice to serve on the school governor's board, but was rejected both times. There were misgivings. No one wished to invite undue influence. And yet someone wanted him placed into the register retroactively. Bentley shuddered faintly. That is what concerns me. Someone wishes to rewrite history in Hawcliffe's favor. Purbright considered that. Or perhaps in their own. Before Bentley could respond, the study door cracked open slightly and Mrs. Minton peered in, her expression apologetic but urgent. Dr. Bentley, Inspector, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but one of the sixth formers insists he must speak to the police. He looks quite unnerved. Purbright rose at once. Send him in, Mrs. Minturn. Moments later, a tall, nervy boy with spectacles too large for his thin face entered the study. He clutched a battered satchel as if it were a life raft. Your name? Purbright asked kindly. Andrew Thistle, the boy replied, voice trembling despite obvious effort. Purbright gestured to the chair opposite. Sit down, Andrew. Tell me what's troubling you. Andrew sat, knees knocking. It's about Mr. Bracegirdle, sir. Not directly, but maybe connected. Purbright leaned forward slightly, inviting explanation. The day before Founder's Day, the boy said. I stayed late in the library. I have exams soon, and it's quieter then. Anyway, as I was leaving, I heard voices near the archive room. Mr. Bracegirdle was one of them. I recognized his voice easily. And the other? Andrew swallowed. I'm not certain, sir. It sounded like a man. Someone older, but he was speaking quietly, and I only heard a few words. What words? Andrew hesitated, uneasy. Mr. Bracegirdle said, I can't ignore it any longer. It isn't just improper. It's deceit. And the other man said something like, Leave it alone, Lionel. You don't understand the damage you'll cause. Bentley sank back in his chair with a soft moan. Purbright remained outwardly calm. Did you hear anything else, Andrew? No, sir. I hurried away before they saw me. Did Mr. Bracegirdle seem angry? Frightened? Determined, Andrew whispered. More than I've ever heard him. Purbright nodded. You've done the right thing by telling us. Thank you. Andrew left, visibly relieved at being dismissed from the weight of adult complications. When the door closed, Mally let out a low whistle. That's a threat, sir. Perhaps, Purbright said. Or a warning. The distinction often lies in the intention rather than the wording. Bentley rubbed his temples again. Who could it have been? If Lionel was confronting someone about the false entry, then someone must have known he had discovered it, Purbright finished, and tried to dissuade him. Fenning, Mally offered hopefully. Possibly. He had access. But we must not forget that anyone who benefits from the Hawcliffe name being inserted could have a motive. Who benefits from pretending Hawcliffe was a benefactor? Mally asked. Purbright turned his eyes to Bentley, who looked suddenly ill. Bentley swallowed. Some years after Hawcliffe's death, his nephew, Gavin Hawcliffe, applied for a grant to refurbish the old science block, a grant available only to families with a documented history of supporting the school. It was denied, of course, as there was no record of such support. And if the register had shown otherwise, Purbright said, the grant might have been approved. Bentley nodded miserably. Gavin was furious when the application failed. He accused the governors of bias. Mally brightened. So if Gavin added the name, he could claim the school wronged his family. He might, Purbright said, but motive alone is not guilt, and young Andrew said the voice he heard was older. Gavin Hawcliffe is in his 30s. Hawcliffe's solicitor? Mally suggested. His solicitor would have no reason to stalk school archives at dusk, Purbright replied. Bentley hesitated. There is one other possibility. Someone who admired Arthur Hawcliffe. Someone who believed the school should have accepted him as a governor. Someone on staff? Purbright asked gently. Bentley looked away. Mr. Fenning was always vocal about wanting stronger ties with local business figures, even those with colourful reputations. Mally grinned triumphantly. Fenning again. Purbright held up a hand. Let us maintain balance, Sergeant. A man may favour questionable benefactors without forging their names. But the coincidence, Bentley began. Coincidence, Purbright interrupted softly, is often only the beginning of a conversation. The room fell quiet again. Purbright's gaze drifted to the window, where the school quadrangle lay under deepening twilight. One lamp had flickered on, its glow stretching over the paving stones like a long finger pointing at something unseen. Purbright turned back. Headmaster, is Gavin Hawcliffe still in Flaxborough? Bentley shook his head. No, he moved to the outskirts years ago. Runs a small construction firm. Never quite prospered. Purbright nodded. We may need to speak with him. Not immediately. For now, I'd prefer to give the nervous party time to believe their warning has had its desired effect. And in that time? Mally asked. Purbright looked at the threatening note with quiet satisfaction. In that time, Sergeant, we shall be listening. People who send threats tend not to remain silent for long. Purbright and Mally stepped out of the headmaster's study into the quiet gloom of the corridor, where the fading light from the courtyard made long, thoughtful shadows across the polished floor. Most staff had gone home, leaving behind the echo of shoes and the faint scent of chalk, but the school did not yet feel empty. Schools rarely did. They held too many stored anxieties and ambitions to ever be fully at rest. As they walked toward the exit, Mally ventured, Sir, do you want me to start asking around about Gavin Hawcliffe first thing tomorrow? Not directly, Purbright replied. His connection may be relevant, but I'd prefer not to alert him. People who feel watched often retreat into silence, and we want someone to speak, or slip. They walked on, gravel crunching beneath their feet as they crossed the quadrangle. Mally mulled this over, then nodded. Best to prod the bushes just enough to rustle what's hiding in them. An apt metaphor. Purbright said, though his tone suggested he was imagining something larger, slower, and more deliberate than bushes. At the gate, they parted briefly. Mally to gather whatever information the school caretaker might offer before locking up, and Purbright toward the high street to take the long way back, allowing his thoughts to wander at their customary patient pace. He passed the churchyard, where the yew trees cast long, ink-dark silhouettes. Across the road, the windows of the bakery glowed warmly, though Mrs. Kettle herself was nowhere in sight, perhaps already seated at home, rehearsing tomorrow's rumors. As Purbright walked, he considered the timeline. Bracegirdle had discovered a false name in the register. He had confronted someone, an older man in the archive room. He had received, directly or indirectly, a threat or warning. Then he had planned his dramatic public announcement, only to collapse before completing it. Yet there was something faintly wrong about the simplicity of that sequence. Bracegirdle was not a man inclined toward impulsive public declarations. Had something forced his hand? Had he believed time was running out? Purbright's thoughts circled the matter with the slow precision of a cat approaching a half-open door. He reached the police station just before 6. Mally arrived minutes later, triumphant. "Sir, the caretaker says he saw someone leaving the staff room around 9 the night before Founder's Day, carrying a bundle of papers." "Who was it?" Mally consulted his small notebook. "He thinks it was Mr. Fenning, but he wasn't certain. Said it might have been one of the senior staff, though the build looked like Fenning's. He didn't see the face." Purbright tapped a finger against his desk. "A bundle of papers." "Yes, sir." "Odd for a bursar," Purbright murmured. "They usually keep their work close to familiar filing cabinets. Papers leaving the building at night is rather distinctive." Mally brightened. "Shall we bring Fenning in?" "Not yet," Purbright said. "Fenning is jumpy. If he is guilty, he will make mistakes. If he is innocent, someone else will fear he is being blamed, and that may flush them into the open." Purbright sat back, thoughtful. "Mally, the caretaker, did he mention whether the staff room photocopier was used that night?" "He did, sir. Said the machine was warm in the morning and had a faint smell of toner." "Good. Or bad, depending on one's view of toner." Mally waited, pencil poised. "What should we do next, sir?" Purbright's eyes drifted toward the window where dusk had fully settled. "Next, we talk to someone who can speak without fear of staff politics." "Who's that, sir?" "Mrs. Drummond." Mally's eyebrows shot up. Mrs. Drummond, the school librarian, was known for her formidable silence toward teenagers and equally formidable loquacity toward adults. She saw everything and judged most of it. They arrived at Mrs. Drummond's modest brick house on Weaver's Close 10 minutes later. She answered the door with the stiff dignity of someone perpetually disappointed by the world, but determined to endure it. "Inspector, Sergeant, come in," she said, as though she had expected them. Inside, her front room smelled faintly of lavender, polish, and disapproval. Purbright settled into a chair while she hovered, arms folded. "Mrs. Drummond, I'm looking into the matter of the missing register and Mr. Bracegirdle's collapse." "I assumed as much," she said. "Lionel is a good man, too good to confront a liar without consequence." "Then you believe he confronted someone?" Purbright asked. "Of course," she replied briskly. "He came to see me the evening before Founder's Day, looked pale, agitated, asked whether the library kept any archival copies of the register. I told him no, that the original was always kept in the archive cabinet." "Did he say why he wanted a copy?" "He said," Mrs. Drummond replied, lowering her voice slightly, "that someone might try to claim the book was incomplete or tampered with. He wanted proof of its integrity." Purbright exchanged a glance with Mally. So he had already suspected an attempt to alter it. "He had a photo of the page," she continued. "He showed it to me. The false name stood out like a sore thumb." "Did he say whose name it was?" "No, and I did not ask." Lionel didn't need gossip. He needed reassurance. Her gaze sharpened. He said he had given the person responsible a chance to admit the alteration, and that if they refused, he'd expose them. Purbright absorbed that. Mrs. Drummond, did he say when he confronted this person? The previous evening, she said, shortly before he came to me. He said the conversation had not gone well. That was his phrase. Mally frowned. We know he argued with an older man. Did he describe him? Only as someone who believed the school owed him and would not tolerate being contradicted. Purbright leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Drummond, did Lionel seem afraid? She considered. Not exactly. More resigned, as if he knew that doing the right thing was going to cost him something. Purbright stood. You've been most helpful. She nodded, then added, Inspector, I hope you find the truth quickly. Some people in this town have hidden behind respectability for far too long. Outside, Mally exhaled. Sir, she thinks Fenning did it. She thinks many people did many things, Purbright replied gently. Librarians see secrets in every overdue book. But Brace Girdle did confront someone, an older man with influence. Yes, Purbright said softly. And influence is seldom exercised by bursars. He started walking, his pace thoughtful. Sir? Mally asked. I think, Purbright said, we must consider not who forged Hawcliffe's name, but who could benefit now from proving it legitimate. Mally blinked. Now, sir. Indeed. Someone may be less concerned with the past than with a very present need. He paused under a street lamp, the glow outlining his calm profile. And tomorrow, Purbright said, we shall see whose need is urgent enough to justify a threat. Morning came reluctantly to Flaxborough, creeping in through a veil of cloud that looked as though the sun had thought better of making a full appearance. Purbright welcomed the subdued light. Mysteries, in his experience, preferred an overcast sky as though sunlight might force them into coherence before they were ready. By 9 o'clock, he and Mally were walking up the path to the grammar school once again. The building loomed with its usual placid, red-bricked self-importance, giving the unfortunate impression that it had been waiting all night for them to arrive and put matters right. Fenning's already in, Mally said, nodding toward a lit office window. Purbright made no comment. The bursar's presence was unsurprising. Anxious men arrived early, hoping to outrun suspicion with punctuality. They stepped inside, the echo of the entrance hall amplifying every footfall. Mrs. Minturn looked flustered, even for her. Inspector, Sergeant. I was just coming to fetch you. Dr. Bentley's in a state. Someone broke into the archive room during the night. Purbright paused, absorbing this not with alarm, but with the quiet confirmation of a man whose expectations had been met. Was anything taken? Mrs. Minturn wrung her hands. Not exactly taken, but disturbed. The cabinets open, papers everywhere. Mally perked up. Forced entry? No, she said. That's the odd thing. It was unlocked. Purbright exchanged a brief glance with him, then followed Mrs. Minturn down the corridor. The archive room looked as though a small, determined whirlwind had passed through it. Drawers pulled out, files scattered, dust displaced. Bentley hovered inside, pale and disheveled, holding a sheaf of papers as cautiously as if they might explode. Inspector, he said, this is outrageous. Someone has deliberately rifled through the archives. They were searching for something. Purbright stooped and picked up a page from the floor. Something they fear may still be discovered, he murmured. Mally stepped carefully among the debris. Sir, look at this. He lifted a torn photocopy from beneath a fallen ledger. It was one of the register pages, one of the pages Bentley had shown them the previous afternoon. Only now, across the margin, new words had been scrawled in large, hurried strokes. Enough. Let this end. Purbright took it from him, reading it with mild interest, as though it were a surprisingly rude note left on a neighbor's car. "Someone's getting nervous," he said softly. Bentley's voice rose. "Inspector, this is blatant intimidation." "Oh no," Purbright corrected gently. "Blatant intimidation is usually more honest. This is desperation." He placed the page neatly on the table. "Dr. Bentley, were these photocopies kept in this room last night?" "Yes. I locked them in my desk drawer before leaving." "And the desk?" Bentley swallowed. "Also unlocked." Purbright nodded. "Convenient." Malley looked puzzled. "Sir, do you think the intruder expected to find the register itself?" "Possibly. Or evidence of the genuine entries. Or perhaps something Bracegirdle might have hidden." Bentley blinked. "Bracegirdle? But he collapsed. Surely he wouldn't have had time to hide anything." "Men under pressure often act before they fall," Purbright replied. "A conscience in motion can be quite efficient." At that moment, Mrs. Minton appeared again, breathless. "Inspector, Mr. Fenning wishes to speak with you immediately. He seems extremely upset." "Does he?" Purbright said with no visible excitement. "Very well." Fenning was waiting in the bursar's office, red-faced and perspiring, his fingertips drumming an agitated rhythm on his desk. When Purbright entered, he leapt to his feet. "Inspector, this has gone far enough. I refuse to be painted as some sort of criminal simply because I access the archives as part of my duties." Purbright regarded him mildly. "Mr. Fenning, no one has accused you of anything." "You don't need to," Fenning burst out. "Everyone's whispering." Mrs. Drummond glared at me in the corridor. "The caretaker keeps hovering outside my door, and now the archive's been broken into. I won't be made the scapegoat." Purbright waited until Fenning's breathing steadied slightly. "Mr. Fenning, we intend to speak with everyone who had access to the archive. Your cooperation is appreciated." Fenning sagged back into his chair. "Cooperation," he muttered bitterly, as though this isn't all deeply humiliating. Purbright studied him a moment. "Mr. Fenning, did you know Arthur Hawcliffe?" Fenning froze. His fingers stopped tapping. His eyes widened, just a fraction, but enough. "Hawcliffe? The councillor? I may have met him once or twice. He donated to several local groups." "And did you admire him?" "Admire?" Fenning scoffed. The man was a braggart, always promising funds that never materialized, always trying to ingratiate himself with committees. Purbright's voice remained gentle. "Yet someone saw value in adding his name to the register." Fenning swallowed. "Well, I suppose someone might wish to rewrite his reputation, but not I, Inspector. I have no interest in flattering ghosts." "Of course," Purbright said placidly. "One final question. Were you here late last night?" Fenning trembled. "No, absolutely not. I left at 6. Ask the caretaker. He locks up." Purbright nodded, offered a courteous thanks, and withdrew. Malley followed him out, eyes wide. "He's lying, sir." "He is," Purbright agreed softly, "but not about everything." They moved toward the front entrance, where the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the direction of the infirmary. Nurse Drabble appeared in the corridor, her expression tight. "Inspector, Mr. Bracegirdle is awake again, and, well, he's asking for you." Purbright wasted no time. Bracegirdle lay propped against pillows, breathing shallowly but alert, though the alertness seemed tempered by resignation. His eyes flickered toward Purbright with something close to relief. "Inspector," he whispered. "I'm here. You mustn't strain yourself." Bracegirdle managed a faint, wry smile. "It seems I did that already." Purbright pulled a chair close. "Mr. Bracegirdle, someone broke into the archive room last night. They were searching for something they feared you might have left behind." Bracegirdle's eyes widened slightly. "Then it's worse than I thought." "Who confronted you that evening, Lionel?" Purbright asked softly. Bracegirdle hesitated, then exhaled. I confronted someone who believed the Hawcliffe name should have been honored decades ago, someone who felt the register's existence was an obstacle to that belief. Purbright remained silent, letting him continue. It wasn't Fenning, Bracegirdle whispered. He's petty, but not bold. It was... His voice broke. His head sank back, exhausted. Bracegirdle, Purbright said quietly, leaning closer. You can trust me. The schoolmaster opened his eyes once more. It was someone, he whispered, who thinks the past still belongs to them. His breath trembled. Someone who was once very close to Arthur Hawcliffe. Purbright did not move, though a faint chill settled on the back of his neck. Outside the infirmary window, the wind stirred, sharp, deliberate, almost like a warning.